The next sleeve that we're going to do for this assignment is the Raglan sleeve. Now the Raglan sleeve is really popular for like baseball shirts, but it's a very comfortable sleeve. To do that, we need to use the shorter sleeve cap. So this is my 2-inch sleeve cap, or my 1 inch at the half size. And I just have my bodice back and my bodice front. I've already added seam allowances and everything, it doesn't particularly matter, but what we're gonna do is we need to combine this with this. We're gonna take 3 pieces, and we're gonna end up with 3 pieces, but we're gonna take some of the front and some of the back and add them to the sleeve piece. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the underarm, and from the underarm seam, the side seam, up to this notch, I'm not going to change the curve at all. But from the notch, I'm going to come over and connect it to the neckline seam. I could go and connect it other places, but for this, we're gonna do it to the neck. That's the most traditional. On the back, we're gonna do the same thing. I've got my double notch here. From the side seam, I'm going to keep that the same, and I'm actually going to come up, and it can be curved. It can be perfectly straight. And you'll notice I'm close to this dart. I could get rid of that dart right now if I want to, but because of how loose this sleeve is, you'll notice that the dart just sort of disappears in the process. But if you wanted to, you could go about closing the dart, and I would change the shape here, and it would keep a little bit more shape. But what's ultimately going to happen is that's going to go away and disappear into fullness on the sleeve cap of this garment. And I am okay with that, because this is a very loose fitting garment. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna cut off the seam allowance from this notch so that I can see what's going on a little bit better. So there goes the seam allowance there. I'm gonna do the same thing on the front. Usually when I do this, I leave this on. However, just for the sake of it being a little bit more visible for the camera, I'm gonna take them off. So this is my single notch, there's my double notch. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this, and I'm going to line up my single notch on my bodice and my single notch on my sleeve, and I'm gonna line them up together right there. And then I'm gonna take the back piece and I'm gonna do the same thing, and I'm gonna line my notches up at the seam line, not at the cut line, at the seam line. And then with those there, I can pivot the back and the front until, let me get rid of this shoulder seam allowance as well, just so that you can see it. I'm gonna pivot that until my double notches match up, my single notches match up, and my neckline matches up. So see if you can tell that that's going on. Single notches at the front matching up here. Neckline at the seam line matching up here. Double notch matching up here. With that all in place, I'm going to do some taping. First, I'm going to tape down that shoulder seam so it doesn't shift. And I'm going to tape this to the sleeve cap. Notice it overlaps here a little bit on the back onto the sleeve, but that's okay, because look, it's a very similar amount to this dart right here. So don't worry about that. But now this is all completely connected. It's not going around anywhere doing anything weird. But now we have to be careful. This part of the sleeve needs to remain untouched. This part, notice I'm pulling back the bodice front and bodice back. This under part of the sleeve can't be touched either. Neither can this part of the bodice center back, not center back, but the back bodice and this part of the front bodice. They can't be touched. But what we're gonna do is cut along these lines that I connected the notches to the neckline. I'm gonna cut along that line right there. I'm gonna cut along this line right here. These two lines are what I just cut. and I can take the back piece off, I can take the front piece off, and I have my sleeve. In essence, what I did was I took the shoulders off of my back and my front, and I added them to my sleeve. So now all I have to do is come in and add seam allowance. So I'm going to add seam allowance to the back along that line that I cut. I've still got my notches. They're still right there. I can do that. I add my seam allowance here. Make sure my notches are nice and clear. Cut that out. And my back is complete. Remember your grain line, or your 3 dots. You don't do an arrow and the 3 dots, just the dots or the arrow. And the only time you can use the dots is when it's on a fold. So make sure you've got some reference to grain line, your style name, style number, or I guess style number, style name, whatever order, so long as they're both there. Piece name, so this is bodice back, this is a size 8, I only need one of these in self, and I'll make this number 2, because I want my center, my front piece to be number 1. Same thing with the front, I'm going to come in and add my seam allowance. Cut that out. Make sure my notch is there. Make sure that my label is there. My grain lines are all there. Notches, everything is there. This will be number 1. I've got my back, my front, and now I need to take care of the sleeve. I already have seam allowance from the notch down, so I really only need to add seam allowance right here. Once this is taped down, it is nice to come in here, and right now it's creating a little bit of a corner. It's nice to blend between through all of this. Make sure that that's a nice smooth curve through the underarm as it goes into the top of the shoulder here. We just don't want an angle right here. But we need to come in and add the seam allowance there. Make sure this is all neat and tidy. Notch. X out everything that you don't need, or erase it so that it's just not there at all. Seam allowance. Do the same thing to the back. Make sure that the angle right here isn't really sharp. Make sure that that's nice and smooth. Fill in our seam allowance. Go ahead and cut those all out. Label it, and this will be number 3. Make sure all your notches are there. So you've got your back that gets sewn on right here. So it sews on here first, and then flips around and sews onto the rest of it. So it might not look like those can sew together, but they can. But this is the Raglan sleeve. So I would just call this bodice front, or BF, BB for bodice back, and then 3, this is a Raglan sleeve. Spelled R-A-G-L-A-N, Raglan. And there you go.